and thank you all for joining us. My name is Martin Long. I'm the Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business and Tourism and also the MLA for West Yellowhead. It's wonderful to be here with you on Treaty 6 territory. I'd also like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection with this land. Thank you to the North Edmonton Gymnastics for hosting us today. I'd like to acknowledge our speakers this afternoon, Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, Doug Schweitzer, the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, and Linda Armstrong, the Executive Director for North Edmonton Gymnastics Club. I'd like to welcome Premier Kenney to the podium.
Well, thanks very much, Martin, and it's great to be here at the North Edmonton Gymnastics Club. It is great to see some of your students who are benefiting from the relaxation of rules in Phase 1 that allows for some limited students' athletic and sport activities, so important for their, not just physical, but also mental and emotional health. And great to see wonderful Alberta operations like this open again with the lights on. I'm here today at the North Edmonton Gymnastics Club with some good news for Alberta small businesses that have been hit hardest by COVID-19. The pandemic and the necessary public health measures have been really tough for many businesses, as we all know. And that's why we have sought to protect both lives and livelihoods, and making that a priority since the pandemic began. Today, Alberta's government is announcing the next phase of our plan to protect livelihoods with an additional $10,000 for hard-hit businesses that will be made available through the enhanced COVID-19 business benefit. This new benefit will replace the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant when it expires on March 31st. That grant, which was launched last June, has provided over $350 million to more than 50,000 small and medium-sized Alberta businesses with employing nearly 250,000 Albertans. We continue to receive applications and make payments from that support program every day. But we know that many of Alberta's small businesses and job creators will still need help for the foreseeable future until we get enough vaccines from the federal government and we're able to move forward safely. Alberta's government will be there for those businesses and their employees every step of the way. The new enhanced COVID-19 business benefit that we're announcing today will ensure that those businesses hit hardest by the pandemic continue to have access to critical support to help them to survive this crisis. It'll give businesses that have experienced a 60% or more drop in revenue up to an additional $10,000 to meet their expenses. Like the Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant that we launched last year, business owners can use this money to support their needs, whether it's paying wages, paying for cleaning supplies, inventory, or preparing for a safe reopening. This is on top of the hundreds of millions of dollars in payment deferrals and other supports that we provided and will continue to provide small businesses as they face these challenges every day. In fact, it's on top of the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy for commercial rent, and Alberta has participated in that with the federal government, which provides up to $50,000 in rent subsidies to offset 2/3 of rent costs. It's also on top of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which is a 75% offset or subsidy for wage costs for businesses that have had to be suspended or scale back because of the pandemic. It's on top of billions of dollars of provincial deferrals on everything from utilities to taxes to fees. It's also on top of $350 million in direct support for small businesses that we gave through a 50% rebate on workers' compensation board premiums. It's on top of deferrals through Alberta Treasury branches, as well as additional liquidity to help them access credit through the crisis, and much more. We're talking collectively about billions of dollars of support, and this is in addition to all of that. Small and medium-sized businesses make up more than 99% of all businesses in the province and represent over half of our jobs in this province. These job creators employ our family members and our neighbors. They've given us our first paychecks, it's true for me, and taught us about hard work and responsibility. They donate to charities and support local sports like hockey and soccer, or in the case of the North Edmonton Gymnastics Club, they actually train young people in athletics. They're the risk takers and thinkers that build our province, and they take real risks. They help Alberta to innovate and have made it the successful province that it is. This pandemic has highlighted just how important small businesses are, not only to our overall economic strength, but also to our general well-being as a society. We've always recognized the damaging impact that many COVID-19 restrictions have had on people's lives and livelihoods. And that's why, since day one of the pandemic, which is hard to believe, just under a year ago, Alberta's government has regarded restrictions as a last and limited resort. It's also why we've never imposed a lockdown on our province. Other places around the world and across the country have imposed lockdowns, including stay-at-home orders, curfews, long-term closures of schools, and the suspension of the vast majority of businesses from operating. None of those things happened here in Alberta. In fact, right now, over 99% of Alberta businesses are able to operate within safe guidelines, like you can see here at the Gymnastics Club. Unfortunately, that's not the case, still not the case for some businesses, a small number, but it is still particularly painful for those business owners in, for example, the events industry, and we know that certain sectors, hospitality, tourism, gymnastics, gyms, athletic businesses, that these have been perhaps hit hardest. And that's why we are providing additional real support. We know that our economy has been hit harder than elsewhere because of the oil price collapse last year, and we were already, I believe, experiencing something of a mental health crisis before the pandemic. We know that tourism, as I say, and hospitality sectors have faced significant challenges. Gyms, fitness studios, and similar businesses have been particularly hard hit. And that's why I joined Dr. Hinshaw and Doug Schweitzer, our Minister of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, and Martin Long, for a town hall on the phone a few weeks ago, actually it was 2 weeks ago, with thousands of small business owners. And they gave us direct feedback, very helpful feedback, and part of that helped to lead to the limited opening of fitness venues for kids like this. I'm here today to say that we are here for them. And we have laid out a plan for a gradual relaxation of public health measures so that business owners can be prepared and informed while keeping a keen eye on the new COVID variants, which can present additional challenges. But we know that these public health measures cannot be safely lifted overnight. That unfortunately just can't happen. And we need to continue to support small businesses and job creators as they cope with the costs of this pandemic. We've stepped up to provide a lifeline to more than 50,000 businesses across Alberta, and will continue to do more. So I want to thank the North Edmonton Gymnastics Club for their hospitality today, and now hand over the microphone to Minister for Jobs, Economy and Innovation, Doug Schweitzer, to provide a few more details.
Thank you, Premier, and I want to say a big thank you to Linda and the people here at the North Edmonton Gymnastics Club for hosting us here today. When I came in, I was mentioning to Linda that my daughters love coming to do gymnastics, so seeing young people here, exercising, practicing their sport is just such an encouraging time to me to see that happening again in our province. And I want to say a big thank you to all of the Albertans that have made sacrifices over the last few months in particular. I mean, cases are down, some are around 80%. Hospitalizations are down, some are 60% down from where they were at their peak. And that's due to the credit to all the Albertans that have listened to the health orders. We know that it's been about a year now that this pandemic has been going on, and people are tired. But you know what? There's some light at the end of the tunnel here. We've got vaccines have been approved. We're hopeful that the vaccine supply is stabilized going forward. We're hopeful that the vaccines start arriving in more regular shipments here, and that'll help give us more certainty in our communities. And all these small businesses that have made sacrifices, we have to be there for them. That's why this new, the enhanced business benefit that we've come up with here is going to be critical to that. The additional $10,000 of support for the small businesses that have been hit hardest during this pandemic, to help them get them through to the full reopening of our society. That's the goal here today, is to make sure that they have the supports they need. And to all the Albertans that are out there, make sure you continue to support small businesses. Order food where you can with your family, get out to dinner, and support these small businesses that are just critical to all of us. And we want to make sure that we get our kids out there where it's appropriate, get them out there, get them exercising. As the Premier mentioned, mental health is just key. We've seen this all in our personal lives. We've all had those days where you get a little grumpy. I've been there. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in my neighbors. And I just want to say again, thank you to everybody for everything that they've done to get us to this point where we can reopen. And we've had that light touch. We've had that ability to listen to the rules, be responsible for this throughout this pandemic, take care of each other. And just want to say thank you again to everybody, to all the small business owners and their patience, their feedback. We've heard you. And again, I remember when we brought into place some of the measures in December, the outcry from small business owners wondering if they're going to get to that other side. And we want to make sure we tell them that we've heard them. We continue to provide supports. We provided, with this program and the previous program, we have the potential to provide up to $700 million of support to small business just through the relaunch grant and through this new business benefit that we're launching here today. So we want to say thank you to them. Thank you to Linda for your efforts here, getting this facility back up and running. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Linda to provide some remarks.
Well, thank you for coming. It was delightful to have some company for a change. So I'd like to thank the Premier and the Minister for coming today. I'll put my glasses on so I can read my notes. Here at North Edmonton Gymnastics Club, we've been in business for over 25 years. We are in the business of sharing our love of gymnastics and encouraging people to be active for life. So we're in the business of creating healthy, safe environments. That's what we do. But this year, things changed. In comes a very different situation for us. The pandemic has created many pressures for us and new challenges. My amazing staff has had to use balance, flexibility, and endurance in a whole new way. So we've been using the balancing act of creating new protocols and following plans, assessing our risks, and we were wondering, is it really all worth it? So often it's hard, it's difficult, is it fun? And we opened the doors for the first time after we had done our first shutdown, and the kids came in, and the smiles and the joy that was on their face, we knew we were making a difference. We knew we were able to keep them safe here. We had worked hard. Parents emailed and called and said, it's made a world of difference. So we knew that our hard work was worth it. With all that, COVID-19 brought a lot of expenses, things that you wouldn't even normally think would happen, like extra snow removal because we're using our parking lots as drive-through drop-offs so that we don't have any people gathering in our lobbies. All these extra expenses add up, and with limited people in, these grants were the only way we could get through. So we did receive funding from the Alberta Government Small and Medium Relaunch Grant. It was put to good use. I was able to keep some staff employed so that we could plan and be prepared for all the things that could happen with following the new way of life, and to keep all the kids safe. So we've appreciated that, and it's important to these guys, and it's important to our community. So with this new funding that you've announced, thank you very much, this will help us to continue because we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we continue to work through these pressures of these new costs, and we reinvent our programming and our rotation schedules to keep everyone safe. But to see our athletes here today training safely and enjoying our space that we have here for them, it makes a big difference. So once again, I really want to thank you for this funding, and thank you for hearing us and knowing that we're here. And here at NEGC, we look forward to being part of our community. This money helps operations like ours to keep serving our community. So, thank you.
So we'll go to the phones for questions now. Just to get to as many questions as possible, we just ask that you keep it to one question. With that, operator, can you please put through our first caller?
First question is James Keller with the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, James.
Hi there. A question for the Premier. I wanted to ask you about this Business Council of Alberta's report this morning that talked about the need for taxes, specifically a sales tax. It also says the province would need to either increase taxes by 34% or cut services by essentially a third to get things in line. So will the budget next week include anything substantial on the revenue side of the equation? And if not, how does the government plan to close this gap long term without at least some money coming in?
Well, the answer to the first question, thanks, James. The answer to the first question is no. As I said a year ago, when the crisis first started, this would be the worst possible time to sink government's hand deeper into the pockets of taxpayers who are already coping with huge financial stress, unemployment, incomes down. This is not this would be the worst possible time to ask people to pay more, especially when Alberta's government continues to spend more than pretty much every provincial government in Canada. Our first obligation to Alberta taxpayers is to show that we can operate more efficiently. And but right now in the crisis, our overarching focus is not on the immediate fiscal challenge, it's on lives and livelihoods. It's on healthcare and jobs. That will be the focus of next week's budget. Record investments in healthcare, in support for those coping with the pandemic, in the recovery plan to create jobs. I've always said we're never going to cut our way out of the big deficit we inherited. We have to be more efficient, and you'll see that in the budget, but we must grow Alberta's economy. So on the fiscal front, the strategy is economic growth first and foremost. So again, the focus of the budget will be protecting lives and livelihoods, investing in healthcare, protecting people from the pandemic and from its economic consequences. You know, we ran on a commitment to create a tax reform panel to give Albertans advice on the best possible pro-growth tax policy for the province, and we will move forward with that commitment later towards the end of our term, hopefully long after we've gotten past the current crisis.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Yes, next is, sorry, it looks like a couple people have left the queue. Next is David Staples with the Edmonton Journal. Go ahead, David.
Hi there, I have a question for the Premier. In terms of vaccine procurement, what was the initial understanding with the federal government about who would get vaccines, and why was what was the reasoning behind that understanding about who would procure vaccines for Canadians? And with Alberta, has that changed at all? Is there a new change where Alberta now will try to get vaccines, and what are you doing on that front?
Sure, thanks, David. On the first question, the federal government stepped up with the provinces early last year when the pandemic started and proposed that it use the entire country's buying power as a market of 36 million people to enter into negotiations with potential COVID-19 vaccine producers. We agreed that made sense. All 13 provinces and territories realized that in a global competition for international vaccine supply, it made a lot more sense to be operating together with a 36 million market purchasing power rather than competing with each other and 192 countries around the world. So that made sense in principle. But it's now clear to us that the federal government was late to the table in negotiating critical supply contracts with some of these companies. They had a total misdirect by pursuing a joint partnership with a Chinese state-owned enterprise that went into that whole project, as you know, went into the ditch, and clearly did not exercise the same kind of political pressure of other countries around the world. I think, for example, of Israel, which has now inoculated first doses over about 3/4 of its population. I spoke to my friend Yuli Edelstein, the Israeli health minister, and I asked him how they got that supply. He said that Prime Minister Netanyahu had been on the phone with the global Pfizer president 17 times up to that point, about a month back. That is the kind of intensity it takes in the global fight for vaccines. As you know, David, we've now seen vaccine nationalism raise its head, and with constraints on exports from the EU and the United States. And I registered in the clearest possible terms our huge disappointment and frustration with Prime Minister Trudeau on our call 13 days ago about the constant slipping of the timelines. The National Operations Center for Vaccine Distribution keeps telling us that they've been giving us a schedule of projected supply since the mid-December, and it keeps slipping. Prime Ministers told me point blank, and the other premiers 13 days ago, no, it's not slipping, you just misunderstand it. Well, we effectively ran out of supply for all intents and purposes here, except for a few thousand incoming doses, about 3 weeks ago. We have a stretch target to be able to inoculate over 300,000 people by mid-March. We don't have the supply to do it. And that is why, on your second question, that is why we have begun working with other provinces on examining all possible sources of domestic production. Minister Schweitzer is taking that on, leading that charge here provincially. I'm working with other premiers across the country to share notes, compare notes, to look at here in Alberta. Of course, we've got Providence in Calgary in partnership with Northern and here in Edmonton, Entos. We've got University of Saskatchewan projects in other provinces. We're comparing notes on which look the most viable and whether we can do something as a provincially led Plan B to increase domestic supply. And I think you smuggled in, against our guidelines here, a third question, which is, who is the understanding was, who would the federal vaccine program be, how would it be shared? The understanding is always be that it would be per capita, and that we would get advice from the National Vaccination Expert Panel. I forget exactly what it's called, but we have our own expert panel, as you know, and that is guiding our vaccination rollout. We'll have more to say about that, I think, as early as this Friday.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Next is Lisa Johnson with the Edmonton Journal. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. This is for the Premier. Sorry, this is a bit of a double barrel. I'm wondering why this announcement is being made today. My understanding is that it's going to be designed over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm wondering about the timing of this announcement. And I'm sorry for asking a redundant question. I know that the health minister has been asked this before, but I need to ask where the vaccine plan and priorities are. While other provinces are outlining these plans in detail, anticipating the next shipments of vaccines, we seem to be in a bit of an information vacuum here in Alberta.
Okay, on the first question, why today? Well, our cabinet just approved the outlines of the program earlier this week. We wanted to give as much notice to small businesses so they know that if they qualify, that this assistance is on the way. The last thing we want are some small businesses permanently closing their doors and then learning after the fact that this additional financial help is on the way. I wish we could have this up and running for applications today, but we do have to create a new system. We have to build an IT platform and make sure it's up and running before we press go on the program. But I know Doug is going to work overtime with his officials to get this going as quick as possible. On the first question, on the second question, Lisa, we'll be releasing our priority lists for the next phases of the vaccine distribution program pretty soon. But frankly, we wanted to see what other provinces are doing. And secondly, a lot of this is, look, I frankly don't understand the huge rush because we haven't even really gotten into phase 1B yet. We don't have enough vaccines. That is the issue. The issue is supply. We are taking care of our part of the deal, which is to make sure that we can deliver as many jabs in as many arms as possible if and when we start to get some decent supply. The problem now is supply. We effectively ran out of supply for all intents and purposes in mid-January. So that is our primary focus. I will say, when it comes to the subsequent phases, a lot of this, Lisa, is quite fluid. I'll give you an example of why. There is some evidence that the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine may not have a high level of efficacy with people over the age of 65. There are differing views on that. We are going to be taking on board the expert scientific advice of our vaccine expert panel about that question. But here's the point. Suppose AstraZeneca, Oxford gets their Health Canada approval, and we start getting that supply in this spring or summer, and let's suppose we get advice from the scientists not to administer it to people over the age of 65. Well, that suddenly changes the whole approach to the rollout. If there's a big chunk of doses that we can't administer to seniors, then we have to change or modify the prioritization of vaccine distribution. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this is a bit of a moving target. There are going to be changes throughout, but we will be releasing the basic outlines of the next phase fairly soon.
We have time for 3 more questions. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Next is Erin Collins with CBC National. Go ahead, Erin.
That's a question for the Premier. Thanks for taking my question. Alumel voluntarily shut down its Red Deer plant, and they've said that that's because they felt it was unsafe to keep it running with the current COVID outbreak there. So we were also told, though, that the facility was in full compliance with all provincial regulations and guidelines. So just some clarity. The question, I guess, is how can a business be too unsafe for owners to operate, but still in full compliance with provincial regulations?
Well, that's a question I would be better put to Dr. Hinshaw and her team. As you know, they've been monitoring that situation very closely. As she said yesterday, through most of the past several months, there has been a very small outbreak of just a few isolated cases that got resolved, and that her information is there had been some spread outside the plant, which led to the recent increase.
Someone died a month ago.
Which is very tragic. And as I'm referring back to Dr. Hinshaw's comments yesterday, where she indicated that there had been a recent significant spread outside of the plant, which led to a spike in cases and the decision to suspend its operations. So on matters like this, these are issues that are the responsibility of our public health experts, in this case in particular, the Central Alberta medical officer and, of course, the chief medical officer and her team. They have worked, I understand, very closely with the operators of the plant, and they brought in dozens of additional safety protocols. Obviously, we're all very concerned about this outbreak, and that is why this operation has been suspended for the time being.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Next is Kevin Nimik with CTV Calgary. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, Premier. I have 2 questions for you. The Critical Worker Benefit Portal was supposed to open today, but appears to still be closed. Why is that? And also, this new grant that you're announcing today requires businesses to have lost at least 60% of their revenue. The old grant required them to have lost only 30%. So why did you make this change to cut out so many businesses that have been struggling?
Sure. On the first question, I'm not familiar with that, and I'll ask the Office of Minister Copping to get back in touch with you about opening up applications for the critical worker benefit. The important thing is it's going to be there for about 350,000 Albertans who've been working on the front lines delivering important services to Albertans throughout the pandemic, $1,200 in a payment to say how much we appreciate their efforts. That will also inject nearly $500 million into Alberta's economy. So it's an important program. On the second issue of the 60% threshold. So we decided that there have been a small number, a relatively small number, of businesses that have borne a disproportionate share of the burden and the pain from necessary public health measures and restrictions, where the vast majority of small and medium-sized businesses have been able to operate right from March of last year through till now. In fact, at the peak of restrictions in the spring, 95% of businesses were able to safely operate. 99% of businesses are able to operate today, but there is that relatively small number in, for example, the certain aspects of the hospitality industry, event venues, obviously gyms continue to be really hard hit. So what we were looking at was those businesses that have been hardest hit, and it made sense for us to focus future financial support on the hardest hit, those who have lost the most because of these restrictions. Some businesses, not a whole lot, but some have actually done reasonably well. There are some sectors that have done pretty good through the pandemic, and they didn't need additional support. That's what we were hearing. But we were hearing for some of those, I'll give you an example, dance studios had been largely shut down for 11 months because of public health restrictions, zero revenue. Those are the folks we really wanted to step behind. Doug, you want to compliment that?
Just to build on the Premier's comments there as well, and we went and sought feedback from small businesses, and not every business in a particular sector was the same. So take a look at restaurants, whether or not you had a drive-through line or whether or not you did breakfast in the morning. For certain restaurants, takeout food really went well. Other restaurants, not so much. So we really wanted to make sure that we design this in a way that is for those businesses that have had that severe impact. And as the Premier mentioned, we all know about the gyms. We all know about the tourism industry, the event sector as well. But not every industry, not every business is designed to just fit into a certain category. So that's why we use the metric of the 60% drop, as well as we've heard feedback loud and clear from small businesses that not all of the federal supports are there in a satisfactory way for every potential business. So we're designing this to get the best bang for our buck, to be there for those businesses that have been hit the hardest throughout this pandemic.
Operator, can you please put through our last caller?
Final question is Audrey Naval with Radio Canada.
I think that'll be you.
Go ahead, Audrey.
Hi, my question is for Premier Kenney. In French, on taxes, Monsieur le Premier ministre, le Conseil, le Alberta Business Council demande à ce qu'on instaure une taxe de vente provinciale ainsi qu'une taxe carbone provinciale dans la province pour essayer de remédier à la situation fiscale. Est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre à voir ces mesures dans le budget de la semaine prochaine? Et sinon, comment est-ce que vous allez améliorer la situation financière de l'Alberta?
Merci de la question. Et la réponse est non. Il n'y aura aucune nouvelle taxe dans le budget la semaine prochaine. Par contre, j'ai dit il y a un an que c'est le pire moment de prendre plus d'argent des contribuables pendant cette crise économique et financière pour les Albertains. Il faut protéger les finances des Albertains maintenant et pas prendre plus d'argent dans les augmentations de taxes. Et par contre, le gouvernement, nous gardons notre engagement électoral à combattre la taxe sur le carbone du gouvernement fédéral qui sera décidé effectivement à la Cour suprême prochainement. Mais notre but dans le budget de 25 février sera la protection des vies et de l'économie, avec une emphase sur le système de santé, avec les investissements historiques dans la santé, particulièrement pour protéger les Albertains de la pandémie, et deuxièmement, pour protéger l'économie avec les investissements importants. Ça, c'est notre focus dans le budget prochainement. Et évidemment, dans le futur, il faut que les Albertains s'adressent à la crise fiscale. Mais c'est pas... il faut mettre l'accent maintenant sur la crise de la pandémie, et ça serait le focus du budget. Merci. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks again, Linda, and your team for welcoming us. Yeah, please.
On using coolers.
All right. Thank you.